Warning: tube amplifiers have lethal voltages inside them. Please do not attempt to build, test, or repair these without understanding and following all safety protocols. Hey y'all! Well, if this is the first of this series that you've tuned into, you might want to go back and watch the first video that shows you the tools and the materials you need. The BOM is on my website at skunkydesigns.com along with the schematic. And what I really like about this headphone adapter is that when it's in headphone mode, it applies a non-inductive 8 ohm load across the taps of the output on your tube amp so that it's reflecting the right impedance to the tubes and keeps the output transformers from being damaged from an open circuit, which could happen if you unplugged your headphones and had some other kind of resistance in series setup done or parallel. So this little box, it's safe. When you switch it to headphones, even if you don't have anything plugged in it, it's not going to make your output transformers arc out, which is important, which is the main difference between using headphones on a tube amp and using it on a solid state amp. So without further ado, let's get to building it. So the first thing I want to do is lay out the jacks on the back, and I want to put these, I'm going to be doing these measurements in millimeters because I know there's some people overseas that watch this too. So I want to make this row here 15 millimeters from this top edge, and then I think I'm going to make this bottom row, I think I'm going to go with the same 15 millimeters. About like that. And so the other thing you want to make sure you do not get in, there's a welded double seam here. And you don't want to get these too far out where you're like drilling into that. So you want to space these in just a little bit. So again, we're going to be going 15 millimeters from the top and 15 millimeters from the bottom. I think that leaves a good spacing between them. And then I try to just pick some kind of even numbers. Like I'm going to put this one at 20 millimeters. And then this one is at 35 millimeters. And then that one's, I believe, at 50 millimeters. And then this last one is going to be at 65 millimeters. And it puts these two in the middle a little closer together, but that's okay. And keeping these fairly even numbers makes it easier to keep up with what we're doing. So I do what I call direct marking using my caliper. So we know this hole's going to be about right here. So we come down and we put our first mark there, and then our second mark is going to be about right there, and then let's make sure we're keeping this, that's about 65, and you're kind of just guessing about where the center is going to be. I mean, if you do mess up and put a scratch somewhere where there's not going to be a jack, you can touch this up with a little touch-up paint, so it's not the end of the world. Okay. And then we decided we were going to go 35 millimeters, which will be right there. See, we missed just a little bit, but that's okay. That, and we'll have to touch that little place up, but that may be underneath a screw head or underneath a jack, so we're not going to see that anyway. And then we'll mark the cross there, and then we said 65 millimeters for this one, which will be right there. And then we come in from this edge, and there's 65 millimeters. And then 35 millimeters. Honestly, guys, this is the hardest part of the layout because we do want these to look fairly symmetrical and not just like all over the place. And so now we come back with our center punch and you want to put a pretty good little mark here. If you're using the aluminum chassis, you can probably use one of those little click automatic center punches, but on the steel, they just don't put a good enough little dent for marking holes like this. So the next thing we know, we were going to come in 20 millimeters, that, and then we're going to come up 15. And this first one will kind of help us judge where to put the rest of these marks. And get this one a little more crosshaired. And like I said, this is on the back. The main thing is to get the holes drilled in the right place. If you end up making a mark on the back where you don't want it and a jack doesn't cover it up, because I mean, even as sloppy as this one ended up being, that's going to cover it up. You're not going to see it. So then we said 50 millimeters, I believe, for this next one. Should be somewhere around in there. And we'll go ahead and do this one. And then we'll do there's our cross mark at 15 millimeters. There. And I had some guy just give me a raft of shit about marking stuff with a caliper this way. If you want to like take the measurements and lay it out on a protractor and do some other crazy thing, or you want to print up the layout on a piece of paper and tape it on here and mark it, however you want to do it. I'm just showing you the kind of down and dirty way I do this. And at the end of the day, all that matters is you get the holes in the right place. So whatever way you're most comfortable doing. And like I said, I've had these calipers for about 30 years. And this is a place where I'm probably going to maybe just try supporting this front edge so it doesn't bend it in the middle here. If you can see what I'm doing here. So we don't want to bow this over here next to the corners. It's a little stronger. You're not going to have that problem. So the next thing we want to do is we're going to drill these holes, and we're going to start off with a 1/8 inch drill bit. This is considered a pilot hole. I'm probably going to edit out drilling some of these, but you kind of start off slow to make sure the bit doesn't walk or like zip across the chassis. And I'm going to move this light, see if we can get a little better. I have to apologize if that lighting wasn't good, but okay, got all of our pilot holes drilled, and that looks like a pretty symmetrical pattern. So the next thing we need to do is figure out what size hole we need to drill as the final size. And so we take this little thing apart. We're not going to use that, and I'll show you why in a little bit. So here's the metal part, and it comes with these two little washers. And see how this one's got like a step on it? You want to drill the hole to the size of this step part, not that size, this inner size, because we have to insulate these things from the chassis. So we go through our drill bits, and it's better to start off small because you can always drill a hole out a little bigger, but it's really difficult to put the metal back. So I usually just hold it up like that and go, you know, that looks pretty close. And that's a 1/4 inch. So let's get our 1/4 inch bit in here and drill one hole out and test it and see how it fits. And then if it fits, we'll drill all these out. And I really believe this is probably going to be the hardest part of this whole build, is just laying these speaker jacks out. And we get our little washer, and fits perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and drill all these out, and then we'll come back and show you the finished result of drilling all these holes. So the last thing we want to do here, and like I said, you're going to need a drill bit selection that goes up to 3/8 of an inch, because you want to use this larger drill bit to come back and chamfer the edges of these holes. So you just give it a little, don't put much downward pressure, just barely let it and it takes a little burr off that hole. Now, it might be a little harder because this chassis is really small. So we've got burrs on the inside here. And so let me see if I can come in here and like see these in here are going to be a little tougher. You may have to get like a flat blade screwdriver, and let's see if this will work, and just kind of go like this and knock off the burrs. If you got a little Dremel tool, I mean, I hate to recommend buying another tool just for deburring the inside of these little holes, because it's not super critical that these be like super smooth. I mean, I do have a Dremel tool, so I may touch these up with a Dremel tool, but you could do the same thing with a piece of sandpaper, a coarse piece of sandpaper, and just kind of run it over the edges of that. Or if you do have a Dremel tool, that'd work really well for smoothing off the edges of that hole. So you want to make sure you get these burrs off though. And then we've got the back of the chassis all done. And one other little tip is clean the metal chips off of your workspace. It might even be a good idea to put like a little towel down to keep from marring up this powder coating. It's pretty tough, but as long as you keep the chips cleared off of where you're going to put it, because if you push down and you got metal chips under there, it will scratch the chassis. So the next thing we need to do, I think, is figure out where we're going to put the jacks in the front. I want to mount all the stuff on the front and the back, and then figure out where I'm going to put the stuff on the top so that it doesn't interfere with it. And like a lot of this stuff is just trial and error. Like I think putting these vertically on this one side over here is going to work well, because then the two outputs are going to be right next to the potentiometer, which is kind of the path of the schematic. So if we're going to put that there, that looks like about, some of this is just kind of eyeballing where you think you want it to be. And you do want to make sure that you don't have to fight with these. Actually, see, I was fixing to put it in the wrong place. I was fixing to put it on there backwards. I want these on the right side. And you don't want to have to mess with this lip with these solder joints. So you want to space this up a little bit so it's not going to be a pain to work with. About 18 millimeters looks good to me. And so let's come over to about there. We'll make a little mark. The main thing is you want the center line, and see again, I want to make sure I'm staying away from this, because this lip overlaps about like that. So we don't want to get anywhere near there. And see, to me, we're getting a little too close to that. So I'm going to move this over just a little bit. And put it more about right there. And then looks like about 18 millimeters. Let's go ahead and go in just a little bit more and make it 20. There's 19. That sounds like a good compromise. One way we can make sure is to come inside and measure the width of this. That looks like 11 millimeters, because this is the same as the folded tab in there. So if we come over 11 millimeters, and then we have the base of this thing, yeah, we're nowhere near the edge. You can actually look at it this way. We've got plenty of clearance there, so we're not getting into the overlap part. And we want to do the same thing here. I want to make sure that that nut's not going to get into the overlap part. I'm going to go 20 millimeters. I think that's a little safer. Let's just add a little bit of fudge room there. We don't want to end up with a problem. And then as far as vertically, make the center about 15 millimeters. Looks good. So we'll come down 15 millimeters. Yeah, that'll look great. And then come over 20 millimeters. So we're going to be drilling two different size holes here, I think. I don't know, those actually may be the same size hole. But again, we're going to do our pilot hole, 1/8 inch. And I know this fabrication work is what scares a lot of people. But this is probably one of the easiest fabrication jobs. And this is a good way to get your feet wet doing this stuff. Because really this one, it's just drilling holes. It's all round holes. There we go. Now we need to figure out what size bit we need for these jacks. And probably wouldn't be a bad idea, since these are some larger holes. We'll go ahead and do a couple of steps up to the final drill size. And we'll do a 1/4 inch and then do our final hole size. And once you have a pilot hole, you don't want to be pushing down real hard when you're drilling. You want to let the bit do the work. Okay. And I don't think it's going to be quite 3/8, but it might be. Actually, I think that one is going to be 3/8. And it would make sense. That's a fairly standard size hole. I'm going to go one bit smaller than 3/8 because we can always drill it out a little bigger if we need to. So this is a 23/64. But I bet we end up going to 3/8. Yep. Not quite big enough. Okay. Easy enough to go up a little bit. And that's one way you can kind of knock off the edges of those burrs, is to, kind of figure eight the bit in the hole a little bit. And that fits perfect. That fits perfect too. So those are both 3/8 of an inch. And I'm going to put all these parts in the BOM so that you'll be able to replicate what I'm doing here exactly. And so these hole sizes will all fit. So I'm going to clean up the inside of these holes a little bit and come back, and probably going to be ready for a second round of the video. I felt it was better to split this up into a couple of shorter segments. I try to keep my videos less than 30 minutes, but I wanted to do a very detailed build on this, since this is probably going to be maybe your first ever do-it-yourself from scratch build. So hope you're enjoying this series, and this is going to be a useful thing for you, especially if you're a headphone user with a tube amp. So if you're enjoying this, please subscribe, please like the video, and I'll see you on the next round of headphone adapter fun. Have a great day.